This is how a normal investor turns 20 years of doing basically nothing clever into an extra $400,000 just by never trying to time the market. That's the number that changes everything, and it's not from picking the right stock or catching the bottom, it's from doing the boring thing on a schedule while everyone else is trying to be a genius. I started investing at 24 with $100 a month, automated into one index fund. Didn't know what I was doing, didn't try to know. By 30, I'd bumped that to $600 a month and still hadn't picked a single individual stock. Today, my invested accounts sit well into seven figures, and I can tell you the honest truth. I never once correctly called a market top or a market bottom, not one time in almost 2 decades. Every dollar of that came from showing up on the same day every month, whether the market was up, down, or on fire. Let's be real about what dollar cost averaging actually gets you, because I'm not selling you a miracle. It's not going to beat a lucky trader who somehow buys the exact bottom in March of 2020 and sells the exact top 18 months later. Nobody does that twice in a row, by the way. That's the part the miracle story always leaves out. What consistent investing actually buys you is certainty. You stop needing to be right about the future. You stop needing to guess. You just need to keep showing up, and the math does the rest. Here's the thing about time in this game. The earlier you start automating instead of guessing, the more those extra years of compounding are working while you sleep, and that gap between starting at 25 versus starting at 35 is enormous, way bigger than people expect. But I don't care if you're 22 with $300 to your name, or you're 48 and you've spent the last decade jumping in and out of the market trying to time it and watching it not work. Every single step here still applies to you starting with your very next paycheck. So here's the deal. 6 steps. No fluff, no here's how to spot the next crash before it happens nonsense, because nobody can actually do that reliably, including the people charging you for the newsletter that claims otherwise. Just the specific mechanical moves that separate people who actually build wealth in the market from people who spend 20 years trading in circles and ending up roughly where they started. Before we get into it, drop a comment with how you're currently investing, automated and consistent, on and off when you remember, or basically setting in cash, waiting for the right time. No judgment at all, I just want to see where everybody's actually at. Step 1. Automate the investment before you ever see the money hit your checking account. This is the single biggest lever in the entire playbook, and it's not optional. If the money touches your checking account first, some percentage of it becomes dinner, becomes a coffee, becomes I'll invest extra next month, and next month never comes. Set up an automatic transfer the day your paycheck lands straight into your brokerage account and buy on autopilot. I set mine up on the 15th and the last day of every month, back when I was making $11 an hour managing a warehouse shift, $100 each time. $200 a month. It felt like nothing. It wasn't nothing. It was the entire foundation. Step 2. Pick one boring, low-cost, broad index fund and stop researching. This is where people burn months of their life that should have been spent invested instead of spent Googling. You do not need 40% in one sector and 60% in another and a satellite position in something trendy. A total market or S&P 500 index fund with an expense ratio under 0.1% covers you. I've had the exact same core fund in my accounts for 18 years. Not because I'm lazy, because switching funds every time something newer looks shinier is how people quietly lose returns to fees and bad timing without even noticing. Step 3. Invest straight through the crashes, on schedule, without adjusting the amount. This is the step that actually makes dollar cost averaging work, and it's the step almost everybody chickens out of in the moment. In March of 2020, the market dropped roughly a third of its value in about a month. I kept my automatic buy running that entire month at the same dollar amount, buying shares at prices that were 30% cheaper than 6 weeks earlier. Those specific purchases made in the scariest month of that entire crash ended up being some of the best performing dollars in my whole portfolio purely because they bought more shares at a lower price. You don't need to predict the crash, you need to already be buying when it happens. Now, quick detour here, because this is exactly the point where people go looking for a shortcut. You'll see traders online claiming they got out right before the crash and back in right at the bottom, and it sure looks impressive on a screenshot. Here's the actual studies on this go back decades, and they consistently show that missing just the 10 best days in the market over a 20-year period can cut your total return roughly in half, and 6 or 7 of those best days typically land within 2 weeks of the worst days. You cannot dodge the crash and still catch the recovery, because they happen right next to each other. The people claiming otherwise are showing you their one good call, and not the 4 times they were wrong. Step 4. Increase your contribution every single time your income goes up, before your spending catches up to it. When you get a raise, before you feel it in your day-to-day life, bump your automatic investment by half of that raise. Got a $4,000 raise? $2,000 of that, spread across the year, goes straight into the automated buy, and you never adjust your budget around it because you never let it hit your checking account long enough to get used to it. I did this with every single raise for 12 straight years, and my contribution went from $200 a month to over $3,000 a month without ever once feeling like a sacrifice, because I was raising my invested amount instead of raising my lifestyle. Step 5, and this is genuinely the hardest one to actually execute even though it sounds simple: do not check your account and react to it daily, and do not try to pause contributions when the news gets scary. This is temporary discipline in the sense that you're not permanently ignoring your finances. You should absolutely review your accounts a couple times a year, but during the day-to-day noise, checking constantly just gives your brain more chances to talk you into a bad decision. The people who pull money out during a downturn and wait for things to calm down are the ones who miss the recovery, because the recovery usually starts while things still feel scary, not after they feel safe again. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, okay, but I genuinely don't know how to actually set this up correctly for my specific accounts, my specific tax situation, my specific timeline, that's completely fair, and it's the exact thing I work through one-on-one with people. I've got a handful of coaching spots open right now where we sit down, look at your actual accounts and your actual numbers, and build a real automated plan instead of a generic version of one. Links below if you want to apply. Not for everybody, no pressure, but it's there. Step 6. The hardest step on this entire list, and I mean that. Once your account actually starts growing into real money, and I'm talking the moment it crosses 50, then 100, then a few $100,000, do not start treating it like a slush fund. This is where I've watched more people quietly sabotage 2 decades of good habits than anywhere else. They see the account cross 6 figures and suddenly there's a boat loan, or they start pulling out chunks to chase some hot stock tip because I've already got a cushion now. I watched my own account cross $250,000 and kept driving a car with almost 200,000 miles on it because the goal was never to feel rich in the moment, it was to actually be building something. The people who win this game long term almost never look like they're winning it from the outside. So if you remember nothing else, automate the investment before you ever see the cash. Pick one boring index fund and stop researching new ones. Invest straight through the crashes without adjusting the amount. Increase your contribution with every raise before your lifestyle catches up. Stop reacting to daily noise and resist pausing contributions when it gets scary. And once the account gets real money in it, don't start treating it like a slush fund. Zoom out with me for a second. That $400,000 gap we opened with, that's not from one brilliant trade. That's the difference between someone who invested a steady amount every single month for 20 years without fail and someone with the same income who tried to time it, sat in cash during a few scary months, jumped back in late, and repeated that pattern 2 or 3 times over the same period, same paycheck, wildly different outcome. Just leave the automated plan running for another 20 years past that, and you're not talking about $400,000 anymore. You're talking about a genuinely different retirement. And before you go looking for the exciting version of this, the guy on your feed with the chart showing he called the exact bottom, ask him to show you his full trade history for the last 5 years, not just the one screenshot he's proud of. Every single trader who's ever gone viral for a perfect call has a folder full of the calls that weren't perfect, and they're not posting those. Boring and consistent beats clever and risky in this specific game every single time over any real stretch of years. I know just automate it and leave it alone isn't the thrilling answer. It doesn't feel like a secret because it isn't one. It's just not something people want to hear when there's a flashier story available. But it's the version that actually works, and it's available to you starting with your very next paycheck, no matter where you're starting from today. Set it up, leave it alone, and let 20 years do what 20 years does. I want to see you win this one. See you in the next one.